for New Zealand and the return of international students to New Zealand. We were able to also talk in a bit more detail about the Maori economy and the size and strength of the Maori economy in New Zealand and its importance in the relationship between New Zealand and China, recognising that it's a very large part of the Maori economy domestically in New Zealand is exporting to China. And so we were able to underscore again the importance of us continuing to grow and foster that relationship.
Prime Minister, are you going to stand Kiri Allan down, and have you had any other instances of this type of behaviour from her before?
Kiri Allan has taken a bit of leave because she's needed a bit of space, and I've absolutely respected that. I've been in regular contact with her. I want to acknowledge that the beehive can be a high-pressure environment, and on occasion relationships within offices can become strained as a result of that. That's not new, and it's something that the Prime Minister's office, both under my leadership, my predecessor's leadership, and predecessors under previous governments have worked hard in order to manage. From time to time, a minister's office will come under a lot of pressure if their minister is under pressure. And there have been instances, as there are with almost every minister, where Minister Allan has experienced more pressure in recent times, and my office has worked hard to address those. There haven't been any specific complaints raised with my office about the minister. Where there have been any relationship issues, we've sought to resolve those.
Is there a connection between her taking that mental health leave and the allegations of how she was treating staff?
Not to my knowledge. She's indicated to me about a week ago, it might have been just over a week ago, that she needed a little bit of space. I absolutely respect that, and I actually would far rather that a minister, an MP or anybody else came to me and said, hey look, I need a bit of space at the moment. I'd far rather they did that than tried to box on if they weren't fully in the game.
She asked her doctors on Sunday that senior staff raised concerns. What other departments have raised concerns, and with who?
As I've indicated, no formal complaints have been raised with me.
Who else has raised concerns?
On a regular basis, my office, through my Chief of Staff and other staff, will manage if there are officers in the beehive that come under additional pressure. It happens in almost every minister's office from time to time where they come under more pressure and the staff are working hard, and sometimes that will result in a bit of tension. We work hard to be able to resolve that. I don't keep a catalogue of that. It is part of the nature of the business that we're in. What's important though is that relationships are managed respectfully and with clear expectations, and that's my expectation of all ministers.
So broader concerns have been raised about the conduct of Kiri Allan as a minister with your office that have had to have been managed?
That's not what I've said, Jane. You're putting words into my mouth. What I've indicated is that in almost every ministerial office there will be periods of tension, and we work to manage those.
You said that your office has had to manage issues in Kiri Allan's office.
What I've said is in every ministerial office there will be periods where there is more tension, and we work to manage them. Jessica.
You mentioned that Kiri Allan came to you with concerns about a week ago. If she was struggling with mental health, why was she fronting the response to National's stuff over the weekend? Surely if she was struggling, she should have been pulled off that kind of stuff.
Ultimately, ministers, as with everybody else, manage their own mental health. Where they ask for some space and some time, I certainly would never stand in the way of that. But I'm also not going to force people to take time off if they want to continue to be involved.
Have you been made aware of concerns about Kiri Allan's conduct as a minister towards staff or officials?
As I've indicated, in every ministerial office, from time to time there'll be periods of heightened tension. Where that happens, including in Kiri Allan's office, we seek to manage that.
Have you sought concrete assurances?
Luke.
Why did Kiri Allan ask for space?
It's not for me to go into the details of any minister's personal life or personal circumstances. That's a question for them. We have had a conversation about it, but I'm not going to share the details of that. I don't think that would be fair or appropriate. But where a minister comes to me and says, hey, look, these are the things that are happening for me, I need a bit of space, generally, unless there's a very good reason not to, I'll say yes.
Have you and your kitchen cabinet discussed Kiri Allan's behaviour before?
We always regularly discuss tension, and where ministers are under more pressure or under more stress, we discuss those things, and we, as a team, we help to manage them.
You keep saying about being under more pressure, though. What does that mean?
Well, from time to time, all of you will be aware, because in some cases, with all respect to all of you, sometimes you're part of the cause of it, where ministers are under more pressure, when they're under more scrutiny, a very legitimate part of the democratic process, that will put them under more personal pressure, and it will put the people who work with them on a day-to-day basis under more personal pressure as well. That can result in a lot of tension in relationships in ministers' offices. That is not new. That has happened in the entire time that I've been working in politics. Most of the time, it is but a moment in a working relationship, and people move past any tension. Other times where if a relationship issue arises where it requires some more intensive intervention, we can do that as well.
These questions are about a broader pattern of behaviour, and whether you have become aware of it, whether you've been made aware of any conduct that you wouldn't find acceptable by Kiri Allan as a minister towards staff or officials.
As I've indicated, from time to time, every minister will have a moment. They'll have periods where they're under pressure, and where they, for example, they may have an interaction with someone that's not them at their best. That is not unusual.
But another ministers, you're speaking in very general terms about all ministerial officers.
In a perfect world, everybody's relationships with everybody else would be perfect all of the time. We don't live in a perfect world, and I accept that ministers, like everybody else, are human beings, and there'll be periods where they're under more stress. I don't catalogue instances where ministers have been under pressure. We work to resolve issues where they arise.
Who's looking after her work while she's taking some space?
At the moment, it's no different to if she was out of...
She's effectively working from home?
Yeah, effectively.
Right.
Yeah.
And have you sought any assurances from her that there are no further allegations of this kind?
As I've said, where pressure arises or when tension arises, we address that. If a formal complaint is raised, then of course we deal with that very seriously.
Can I just clarify, as the Stuff story has reported it today, is that accurate in terms of, a staffer seconded to work for Kiri Allan chose to leave early because of working relationships in the office, and those concerns were raised through the Department of Conservation Chief Executive to the Department of Internal Affairs, which manages ministerial services. Is that all accurate as far as you know?
Those would be questions for those respective agencies. In terms of people, as you'd be aware, not formally, as you'd be aware, people rotate in and out of the beehive on a near weekly, daily basis. That is the nature of the way beehive secondments work. I don't get a detailed explanation of who's coming and who's going and the reasons for leaving.
But presumably if the head of Department of Conservation has made a complaint that's gone to Ministerial Services, given the situation that you've had over the last 5 months where you have constantly said that you want to know things first before they blow up, have you said to Ministerial Services, look, give me a heads up on these things? Have you received any information that there were concerns here? Isn't this something you'd want to be on top of?
Certainly, if there is a complaint about a minister, then yes, I would expect to know about it.
So it doesn't go below a complaint, it's only if there's an official complaint that you actually get involved. You're not getting any information about sort of concerns at levels below a complaint, but presumably still problematic.
There's issues of natural justice here as well, in which ministers are also entitled to, despite the public office that they hold. Rumours abound all of the time about, relationships within the beehive. I don't make it my business to investigate every rumour that comes my way, but I would expect if there are serious relationship issues or where a complaint has been made that I would be alerted to those.
But this is not one that you were alerted to, so this didn't meet the threshold that you have set for being informed about issues in an office, is that what you're saying?
As I've indicated, no complaints have been raised with me.
Could you run us through the steps now for Sir James Wallace after the news broke today?
Yeah, so there's a process that the Cabinet Office will lead, as they have done in the one other instance that I'm aware of in recent times. There's a right of reply, if you like, and so they'll have to go through that process, and then a final decision is made. As Prime Minister, I would make the recommendation, in this case to the Governor-General on behalf of the King.
What did Premier Li say about the Maori economy and forging that Maori-China relationship?
As I indicated yesterday, I generally won't go into comments that they made, but I'm certainly happy to elaborate on the comments that I made, which is to really stress the importance and the growth in the Maori economy in New Zealand. If you look at the statistics, half of our fisheries, a significant proportion of our red meat sector, a growing part of our dairy sector, areas such as kiwi fruit, for example, we see strong Maori presence in the growing community there. So that's an important part of the backbone of New Zealand's economy, the primary sector. And China is the largest export market for our Maori exporters. So we were able to underscore the importance of that, as evidenced by the fact that we've got a strong Maori delegation on the trip here, and that we're able to showcase Maori culture on our visit to China as well, as evidenced by the very strong presence of Te Whanau Apanui, who I think have made us all proud to be New Zealanders.
Why did you make a point of mentioning that today?
Because the Maori economy is something that I think even New Zealanders back home would underestimate the size and the value of. It is a really important and growing part of our economy, and the health of the Maori economy is going to play an increasing role in the health of our overall economy, and that's good for all New Zealanders.
Are you aware of any concerns raised by any CEOs or heads of any other agencies or departments for which Kiri Allan has portfolio responsibilities about her conduct towards staff or officials?
As I've already indicated, I don't keep a catalogue of every time there's a conversation about whether or not there's tension in a minister's office. Where it reaches the level where serious concerns or a complaint is raised, then obviously we would take that, we would elevate that and we would take that more seriously.
So is it a no?
As I've indicated, I have not received any complaints.
Are you worried
I
that this...
I asked whether you had been made aware of any concerns expressed by any other agency or department's heads.
I'm not aware of any which have required a process to be initiated.
Premier
Just on the
Li's
cosmetics,
just returned from a
Richard.
trip to Europe. Did you discuss that and any insights he might have into the Ukraine war? And did you discuss with him your own trip to Europe, to the NATO meeting? And included in that, did you discuss the NATO expansion into the Indo-Pacific?
There's a lot of questions, Richard. We did not discuss my forthcoming trip to NATO. I did, as I did yesterday, was able to underscore the New Zealand position that if China can exert any influence to bring an end to the war in Ukraine, that we would encourage them to do that. We see it as an illegal and an unjust war. And if China's in a position to be able to exert influence on Russia in order to get them to withdraw their troops and seek a diplomatic end to the conflict, then we would certainly encourage them to do that.
Did he have any insights from his meetings with Schultz and Macron, etc.?
As I've indicated, it's not my position to speak on behalf of another country.
Just on the cosmetics.
Is there anything you learned from business delegation over the past few days that you carried into those meetings and raised in either of the two meetings you've held? Anything specific from the business delegation they asked you to raise?
Yeah, as I've indicated, areas such as digital technology, cosmetics, and a few other areas where there are new and kind of emerging issues in the trading relationship, been able to hear firsthand about that from some of the exporters seeking to do business here in China, and been able to put those on the table, albeit at a relatively high level. But that's the way these processes start. You raise issues at a high level first, and then a whole lot of other wheels, gears in the machinery start to turn. So I'm optimistic that we'll be able to continue to work through those issues.
Just on the cosmetics, isn't the problem from the New Zealand end, in fact, if we did what Australia does certify these products, then they wouldn't need to be animal tested. So why are we raising it with the Chinese?
Well, the key thing is that has to be accepted on this side. So that's like I said, making sure our regulatory systems are compatible is clearly an area of importance in trade.
Within Solidarity, Aotearoa says that they're very disappointed with the lack of emphasis on human rights, that you're turning a blind eye to genocide by not raising it more forcefully. What's your response to that?
Well, today's conversation was a longer conversation, so it was an opportunity for me to elaborate on New Zealand's position in more detail, and I did that.
Are you able to give us any more detail about your side of the conversation at least?
It'd be fair to say I didn't raise anything new that we haven't already raised, but I was able to re-register New Zealand's concerns and restate our position, and that was acknowledged.
And how was...
If you're being given regular updates about tensions and pressures with ministers, how come you gave Kiri Allan another portfolio after Michael Woods stood down recently?
As I've indicated, almost any minister's office will experience periods of tension from time to time. Kiri Allan is a minister who sets high standards of the people who work with her. I expect all ministers to do that.
Well, why is she working from home if the problem is that she's under pressure at work? I mean, shouldn't she be giving her portfolios to somebody else?
As I've indicated, Kiri's indicated for a range of mental health and wellbeing reasons that she wanted to have a bit of time away from the coalface. I've respected that. I have not gone into the reasons for that. I don't think it would be fair for me to do that.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? She wanted to be away from the coalface, and now you're saying that she's responsible for all these portfolios.
People have a range of personal reasons for wanting to be away from work. That does not mean that it's related to work.
So this specific dock incident that's been brought up by Stuff Today happened a year ago. So can I just get a bit of a timeline from you? Is this something that was dealt with or was being dealt with? Was it part of a handover when you became Prime Minister? Can you talk through the details?
I'm not familiar with all of the details of something that happened a year ago, but as I've said, if any complaints were raised with me, then I'd take those seriously.
But it wasn't raised with you when you became Prime Minister or when you were a senior Cabinet Minister in that period, that there was a process or any concerns or anything going on in that office to do with the Department of Conservation staff?
Not to my recollection at the time. Obviously, I've become a bit more aware of it in recent weeks because there have been public questions about it.
How long are you confident there's going to be no more stories coming out about Kiri Allan?
Look, I think what's important is that ministers are also entitled to a fair process here. When allegations are put, ministers should have an opportunity to consider them and to respond to them. And I think I'm sure Kiri, at the appropriate moment, will make her own statements.
Aren't you worried that it just looks like we're repeating the script of Stuart Nash and Michael Wood, where there's a story and then weeks later there are more and more stories until she eventually has to go?
No, as I've indicated, Kiri's currently taking a little bit of time away from work for a variety of personal reasons. I absolutely respect that. I actually encourage ministers, if they do find that they need to take some time off, to do so. The fact that these issues have arisen during the time that Kiri is off doesn't mean she should rush back to work if she's not ready to do that.
Would you have a chat with Jacinda Ardern to see whether there are any more of these sort of skeletons in the closet? This happened a year ago. This probably should have been handed over to you.
We talk relatively frequently. That doesn't mean that we're necessarily cataloguing everything that happened in the 5.5 years before I became Prime Minister.
Part of that issue also that some of these things weren't even raised with the former Prime Minister, and it's a former office staff situation that perhaps isn't passed information on.
As I've indicated, you wouldn't necessarily expect every issue in every minister's office to be raised with the Prime Minister.
The partnership will be launched shortly. How important is that in terms of forging relationships with China and New Zealand?
Sorry, I missed the first part of the question there.
Kiri Allan Fellowship will be launched at the university shortly. How important is this to keep the ties with China strong moving forward?
I think Kiri Allan is really fondly remembered here in China, a very, I think, symbolic part of the relationship between New Zealand and China. So I think it's nice that we'll have the opportunity to commemorate and to remember his contribution, to celebrate him as an individual, and to sort of build on that foundation and look to the future.
And how desperately does New Zealand need Chinese tourists and foreign students right now?
New Zealand obviously values tourists from everywhere in the world. China has been a big source of tourism to New Zealand in recent times. We're very excited about welcoming tourists back to New Zealand. And similarly, in international students, they add a lot to our educational institutions. And we're really excited about the prospect of welcoming more of them back.
What were the main economic matters that you and the Premier discussed?
I guess all of those conversations begin with the rapid growth and trade between New Zealand and China in recent times, particularly since the free trade agreement was entered into in 2008, and the opportunity for us to continue to broaden and deepen that. So, as I've indicated, we had an opportunity for a conversation about new and emerging areas where there might be, regulatory issues to work through, and there's a goodwill on both sides to be able to do that. We were able to talk about the sort of, I guess, the respective economic positions of both countries in terms of economic growth, in terms of just, what our future trajectories are, and I guess the growing strength of middle income earners here in China, which they're proud of, and they see that as an opportunity for countries like New Zealand, as we do.
Aside from the Ukraine Russia at all and everything that's going on there at the moment?
Not beyond the war in Ukraine.
Yesterday, you talked about countries looking inward rather than outward, driven by some internal issues. Were you talking about the United States?
I wasn't referencing any country in particular, and in fact, I'd notice and I'd note in many countries, electoral cycles play a role in these things as well. We have seen instances in recent times where countries have become more nationalistic, and then sometimes have moved a little bit in the other direction. Obviously, whilst I'm very proud to be, I am very proud to be a New Zealander, but New Zealand exists within a global community, and we're a trading nation, so we have a very outward-looking view of the world, and it's in our interest for other countries to have a similar approach.
Well, what therefore is our position on decoupling? Where do we stand there?
New Zealand has a range of bilateral and multilateral relationships right the way across the globe, and we intend to continue to seek to enhance, preserve, maintain and expand those.
So we won't be listening to the Americans if they ask us to wind down trade with China and certain commodities.
We've never received such a request.
Could you work with President Trump?
That's a matter for the American people.
Yesterday's meeting with President Xi at the Great Hall was probably a pretty big day for a boy from the heart, I'm going to assume. Have you now, having slept on yesterday, got any new reflections, I guess, on how significant that was, or kind of had anything come to memory that perhaps in the moment yesterday you didn't quite think about?
Look, it's a pretty imposing building, and it's obviously an incredible opportunity to go and to visit and to take part in an event like that. There's a lot of ceremony that goes with that. Yes, that's a big thing for a boy from the hut to be part of, but it's also, I think, a great opportunity to be able to represent New Zealand and to be able to do something that I think is of significance to the day-to-day lives of New Zealanders. Our trading relationship with China has a material impact on our standard of living as a country.
When you're walking those red carpets like you were today in the pomp and ceremony and stuff, was it a bit of a pinch me moment?
Oh, always.
Christopher Luxon said you've done a pretty good job. What have you done wrong?
I think that's a commentary on my tenure as Prime Minister, and I welcome the endorsement of the Leader of the Opposition. Thank you.